Personnel and Animal Welfare to order. Present are Mitch O'Farrell and myself, Paul Koretz. We're going to start with public comment, and we have one speaker, Phyllis Doherty.
There were letters that I don't know if you have them, that so that you know what I'm talking about. You ready for me to start? Thank you. Phyllis Doherty. And I brought you something today that we've been noticing, but it hasn't been corrected, that Best Friends is not in good standing on their corporation. They have not filed. Since the year they got this contract, amazingly, they filed in June, and then they never filed after that. And the odd part is that they have been incorporated since 1968. They were first the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Then in 74, they changed to the Foundation Church of the Millennium. Then they changed in 76 to the Foundation Faith of God. Then in 93 to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. And so that corporation has followed along, and they've apparently kept it in good standing since 1968, so it just seems very, very odd. There's no change of officers, but Francis Batista's been there all the time, Gregory Castle. So I know you're probably getting ready to award this again, and it wouldn't be really good to award it to someone that isn't in good standing, so I hope that this can be corrected, or at least you can look into it.
We'll take a look at this issue. Thank you. Let's see who is here already. Why don't we start with item number 3.
Item number 3, Department of Animal Services report relative to amending Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 53.63 in regard to barking dog noise requirements.
And we have our general manager here, Ms. Barnett. I wonder if you could walk us through the need for these amendments.
Sure. What we're trying to do, Brenda Barnett, General Manager, Animal Services, we are trying to just clean up the language and get it so it's a little bit more clear both for the owner of the dog and the person who may be having a concern about barking dogs. So in discussions with our hearing officers and with the commission, we wanted to delete the language that requires the barking to be continuously audible for 10 minutes or intermittently for 30 minutes because that is not really a good definition or one that we can work with when we're trying to deal with the hearings. We also wanted to change the language to reflect that the second complaint should be received after rather than within 15 days. This is just cleaning up the language. If it comes within 15 days, we don't really know if any change has been made at all in the behavior. So we wanted to say that it has to be after 15 days, after we've issued a written notice. So if they're going to keep adding on notices, that's okay, but we should go at least 15 days. And then to direct staff to transmit the action to the office of the mayor and the city council. What we'd like you to do is to ask the city attorney to adjust the code to reflect these changes.
And I'm not entirely clear on why the excessive noise change will be less problematic. What was the problem with it originally?
We get people who come in and show us log after log after log, and a dog can bark for 2 or 3 minutes every night at 2 o'clock when you're trying to sleep. Might be just as disruptive as having that dog bark 10 minutes in the afternoon continuously. So we wanted to put a little bit more discretion for the hearing officers and for the commission if they hear an appeal.
No, I think that makes sense. Why the after 15 days? Was that just an error in the original?
I suspect it was. We thought we were trying to clean up the language a little bit. If they just keep, complaining and complaining and complaining, it may be before we actually give the person who owns the dog an opportunity to get it and respond and start keeping the dog quiet, particularly if it's sent by mail rather than hand-delivered.
Mr. O'Farrell, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think these are great amendments, so thank you for bringing this to the committee. Just some questions, just for my own information. About, on average, how many complaints of barking dogs does the department receive every year, sort of ballpark number?
Well, we probably get a couple of complaints a week, and sometimes they are mitigated just by the officer going out and saying, by the way, do you know that your dog is barking, causing a problem, and here are some suggestions for how to stop that. The ones that actually go to hearings, we're running a couple of months behind on our hearings now, and we have a backlog of about 18. That includes barking and dangerous dogs.
Okay. And this is probably more anecdotal than anything else, but maybe it isn't. Any cases of retaliation where a neighbor gets angry at another for calling in their barking dogs? What is that situation like in general?
Well, that's where our hearing officers have to really sort of read what's going on and find out. I mean, I've heard cases myself where there was a landlord trying to get us to do their eviction for them. And we've had to say, no, that doesn't apply. There was some legislation added, I can't remember exactly when, but in the last year, I believe, where it had to be two neighbors who were close enough to both be bothered so that it was trying to work on just that retaliation type of thing.
And lastly, what are your thoughts on the whole anonymous complaint system vis-a-vis barking dogs versus the, you document, and if it comes to a hearing, the accuser has to be there to witness? What are your thoughts?
Well, the first time a person calls in and says that they're being troubled by a barking dog, we will send someone out anonymously and not say who told us, and say, it's a concern by a neighbor or some neighbors, and we wanted just to bring it to your attention and let you correct it. The next time, it's sort of hard to have a hearing if you don't have both sides represented. So we tell the people that if it gets to the point that it goes on, we will have to ask you to appear. I'm not sure how we could do that without a witness.
Nor do I. That's a point that I'm pondering, because sometimes, I think it's rare, but it does happen, where one household might have a whole block in some form of fear.
Yes.
And to even approach the issue because there's a fear situation. In that instance, it would be helpful if there was an anonymous system, but I can't imagine either how you would do that. It's kind of like when you witness a crime, you're going to have to come forward and be a witness in order for the prosecution to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Brenda.
And I'd imagine the first time you pick up a lot of solutions anyway, anonymously, just by the person being notified that their dog is barking.
Absolutely. It also gives us an opportunity to check and see if they have a license, to see if they're spayed and neutered. And sometimes we find they're not, and we can just explain to them that, your dog may be quieter if you go ahead and have him altered. And you're going to need to, or buy a very expensive dog license.
Very good. Well, thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move this forward and approve the board's recommendations without objection.
No objection.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. You were right. I missed a card, so we will ask Phyllis Doherty to speak on this item as well.
Phyllis Doherty, and I'm not opposing this. I guess it's a great idea, but I do want you to know that this came from our new commission president, David Katz. He's the one that noticed that there was a problem with the legal aspect of it, improving the 10 minutes or whatever length it is, and that it needed to be a fairer system because there's nothing worse than living next to a barking dog whenever it's happening. And the other thing is that there's usually something wrong with the dog. So if you're a person that really cares about dogs, and that's the way with 99% of the people that come in and complain, they're not only complaining for their own benefit, but also they love dogs, and they know that there's something wrong, and they know the problems that exist there. So there's a lot of talk about, how people are trying to get even, and landlords want to move people. I've been at this a long, long time. I've rarely seen that happen. This is usually very, very legitimate, and people deserve to be able to sleep Right, so this is great, but I think our new commission deserves credit. Just so you know, they're making a lot of moves like this where they're really looking into things and trying to make sure that problems that have existed are corrected.
Very good. Thank you. All right, let's do item number 2.
Item number 2, Information Technology Agent Report in Response to Motion, Weston Blumenfield, Weezer, relative to the proposed digital inclusion program to maximize usage of city-owned computers that the city no longer intends to use. This matter was considered by the Innovation Technology and General Services Committee on May 27, 2014.
I wonder if you could just very briefly tell us about this program.
Good afternoon, council members. Mark Wolf, Executive Officer with ITA, and with me is a colleague from Bureau of Sanitation.
Karen Koga with Bureau of Sanitation.
The city is embarking on a very exciting project to repurpose 8,000 plus PC computers that no longer are in use to a digital inclusion program. With the benefiting audience that would be targeted would be the low-income community, with both nonprofits serving that community as well as placement of some of the PCs in individuals/families. So the city, through Mayor Garcetti's leadership, along with Council President and Councilwoman Blumenfield, ITA, General Services, and Bureau of Sanitation, and City Attorney's Office has been working on the development of this program. The item before you that relates to this committee is for 2 as-needed student workers that would be part of the resources that would be backfilling work that would be performed by the full-time equivalent position that ITA is assigning to the project. The Bureau of Sanitation is funding this project through their resources, and we have one correction to the report recommendations that we would like to offer for your consideration. Recommendation number 3 currently has information about the funding required from sanitation for the position. That information is correct. The sentence can actually end at the word new service. The portion that said that to instruct sanitation to submit unfreeze requests for managed hiring can actually be omitted. My colleague from Bureau of Sanitation shared with me that sanitation currently has a blanket unfreeze for all as-needed positions required for their bureau, so that step will not be necessary for this process.
Yeah, very good. That was my major concern with this, that a tiny student worker allocation be going through the whole managed hiring process. So if we can amend that to remove that and make it clear that that won't be an impediment, I have no problems with this. Mr. O'Farrell, any questions? So we will move this item without objection to approve ITA's recommendations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And item number 1.
Item number 1, CAO report relative to request by the Bureau of Street Lighting for 2 substitute positions for 1 street lighting electrician supervisor 2 and 1 street lighting construction maintenance supervisor 3 to replace existing positions of street lighting construction maintenance superintendent 1 and street lighting construction maintenance superintendent 2, which are already in the adopted fiscal year 2013-14 department personnel ordinance.
And this was a somewhat confusing change, so I wonder if you could try to briefly walk us through it.
Do you want to do it?
Sure, I'm David Hirano with the Office of the CAO. What the request is for substitute authorities for the class of street lighting electrician supervisor 2 and 3. 1 position in each pay grade in lieu of, or instead of, street lighting construction and maintenance superintendents 1 and 2. When we went to establish the class of street line construction and maintenance superintendent, the salary was set at a level that doesn't allow the current incumbents from the street line electrician supervisor to move over without a cut in pay. So in order to remedy that situation, we need to authorize substitute authorities to employ the existing incumbents in the street line electrician supervisor classes, and to give us time to reset and provide new recommendations to council to reset the salary for the superintendent classes so that the incumbents can move into them without a loss in pay. So this is a temporary measure. We view it as a measure that's technical in nature, and we will come back to you with a salary ordinance that will correct the situation, and we do not see this as a long-term need. The Bureau of Street Lighting has sufficient funds within their budget to handle this as well, so both in 13-14 and 14-15.
So essentially, these folks were hired at too high a salary for the actual work that they were doing originally.
No,
Is that correct?
we were trying to bring in the street line construction and maintenance superintendent class, and with the intention that those positions would essentially replace positions that are currently allocated at street line electrician supervisor. But in order to move the incumbents out, we didn't want them to lose salary. Unfortunately, the way the salary ordinance was set up, that situation has occurred, so instead of moving them out, we want to come back with revised recommendations on salary, and then we will attempt to move the personnel. So they're existing employees, and this is an attempt to create a situation where existing employees can move from one class to another without a loss in pay.
Just one slight correction to that. Since the salary was set for the superintendent class, the class was accreted by a bargaining unit, so it wouldn't be a salary ordinance. That's why we need the time, because we have to negotiate a revised salary with the union. So it's the management employees unit represented by the Los Angeles Professional Managers Association. So with that,
Thank you for that correction.
yeah, just with that
Yeah,
sort of
forgot about
correction / clarification.
But we obviously are trying not to create a demotion for employees that are doing a perfectly good job, and
Correct.
they're not
Right,
being,
it was-
quote, demoted for any problem. It's just because of the movement and classification.
Right,
Correct.
and it's a timing issue, so the sub-authorities will allow us a transition period and extra time while we negotiate a revised salary.
Makes sense. Any further questions? No. If not, we will move this item and approve the CAO recommendations.
Thank you, sir.
And I believe we have no other items on this very lengthy agenda, so we are adjourned.